I am really happy that our next guest is here, and I'm sure he's happy that he's not in Washington, D.C. right now. Joining us is Congressman Juan Ciscomani. Thanks for coming in again.
Always happy to be on, man. Thanks.
So Senator McCain used to say he was trying to do God's work in the city of Satan. That's how he described Washington, D.C.
Well, I always say I'm happy to be back. It keeps me informed. It keeps me plugged in. And it also keeps me married.
Yeah.
So being back home is always a good thing.
I want to talk about the border, obviously, specifically the border issue. Last time you were here, we talked about some bipartisan work that you and Democratic Congressman Greg Stanton of Arizona were working on. Has there been any movement and positive movement on that? Could we actually see something come out of the House?
Yes, I think so. So what Greg and I did a few weeks ago, we led a coalition of bipartisan members to the border, Democrats and Republicans, New York, California, Midwest. I mean, it was from all over. And what the agenda looked like is to tackle the three issues that we've been talking about. Security, of course, that was a priority. Also, an immigration law, what asylum looks like, what the law really says about that. And then also the trade and the commerce. We actually skipped over to the Mexico side, visited a manufacturing plant, an American company there that they're opening up a location also in my district in Tucson. So we got to see the three facets of this, right? The trade and the commerce, the security, and the immigration law piece of it as well. So the plan is, that happened towards the end of the last time we were back in the district. So now the plan is to work on something together. Listen, when you learn new information together, you tend to kind of see things in the perspective that you can find some common ground. And when you look at what's happening at the border, these Democrats that came here saw firsthand, listening from law enforcement and Border Patrol, what's really going on at the border. So they went back home much more better informed than they were before.
Now, it's a double-edged sword, and I think most things in life are. It is an election year, which can be good, where people want to get things done because they want to get reelected. But also, for people within the party politics, it can be bad because the word bipartisan is not necessarily a good thing in either party's base. You were just named the most bipartisan congressional member in Arizona's House delegation. Now, I'm sure for you that you believe that's successful, and so do I. But does it hurt you with some of the base that you're working with a Greg Stanton?
Well, what this says, what that ranking says, and that's a very prestigious and legitimate ranking that they do for all members a year of 2023. So it comes out now in the spring. I'm ranked the top most bipartisan member. And that has to do because we want to work on solutions. And I when you live in a cycle like the one we live in, that every 2 years you're running, and it seems like in January of the first year in office, you're already running for office. You never stop running. So this whole notion that, it's election year and you got to scale back the bipartisanship, I don't buy into that. I'm going to work on results, whether it's January of the first year or right now of the second year.
But are you concerned? Let's talk about the Democrats that were on this trip with you. If their eyes were open to some things, and I don't know the ins and outs of it, but if they said to you, I had no idea about whatever that issue is, isn't there a concern that they're going to go back to their district and be worried that even though I feel that what we need to do is we need to act on this, if I act on this, it's going to hurt me to get reelected?
Well, I think that, and I don't think you're describing your thought process here. You're describing what some people may be thinking. And I think that's a problem, because when we're more worried about the political aspect of something versus finding a real solution for it. Listen, the bill that I brought into the floor a few months ago, every Republican voted for it, and 56 Democrats also voted for that bill. Why? Because it's a common sense bill that tackles high-speed chases in our mainly rural areas in my district and many places. If that's going to save people's lives, I'm not thinking too much about who's going to be happy or unhappy with the politics side of it. We need to find solutions, and that's what I'm bringing forward.
Arizona Congressman Juan Ciscomani is joining us in studio. So then let's talk about, as long as we're talking about this, the Senate again, and I think Senator Sinema was kind of scathing in her remarks that it was political theater of bringing this back up and it was defeated. Is there a chance you can get something done that the Senate would actually take up? That's the other hurdle.
Well, yeah, and that's the other point as well. When you look at, why bring Democrats into the fold and have them see what's happening at the border? Because we're in a divided government. Now, we're working hard to keep the House Republican and win the White House back and hopefully the Senate as well. But if we end up in a divided government again, we need to make sure that we're working for solutions here, and we can't have, we'll work on this in 5 years now when we get it all back. We can't work on those cycles. So when you look at the Senate bill, And now it actually failed by greater numbers this second time around because as the senator described it, it wasn't going anywhere when they saw that. I want to crack at this. I want to make sure that we can look at all the aspects of it. There were some good things on there. I had my serious concerns on it as well that I expressed. Does that mean you throw the whole thing out without trying to fix it? This is where we got to come in and say, okay, let's look at the good elements of it, fix the things that were wrong with it, and let's move the ball forward. We're not going to get everything we want, but we should be able to get something better than what we have right now.
When I heard you the first time describe it as 3 buckets, I thought, what a concise way of saying this. But I would say, for me, it's border security and everything begins with that. Because
Yes.
It doesn't matter what laws you create with immigration.
100%.
If we don't control the border, do you believe there's a consensus of that opinion on both sides of the aisle?
I don't think with everyone. To be honest with you, I don't think with everyone. I think that they're coming to that conclusion either for political reasons or because they're seeing the reality. The members that came here with us, I do believe that they meant well by all this and learning from it. So I think in that sense, they go back and say, wow, I heard from a sheriff, from a Border Patrol agent that were on the border. They go back and they realize that. But the voting record shows for some people. And I got to tell you, though, people on our side of the aisle have voted against funding for Homeland Security as well. So the issue goes deeper than just, do we want to get something done? It's people that actually want to get something done and people that want to play politics with it on both sides of the aisle.
Do you think it's helpful that mayors like the mayor of New York, who is now negotiating, talking to ICE about ending their sanctuary city laws because they realize that border security is hurting everywhere in America? Is that helping the cause for border security nationally?
It's helping us make the point that we've been saying this entire time, that every state has become a border state. And these same mayors that were promoting sanctuary cities 3-4 years ago, and they were saying, come here and opening it up and inviting people, it looked great on paper for them. But once they started seeing the reality of it and how much it's costing, they're having to make a 180 on that. Whether they're genuine or not, the reality is that those are their new statements. But you know who hasn't been behind the ball? Many of the mayors in my district. I'll give you an example. Sierra Vista Mayor McCaw. He was elected the same year that I was. Started as a Democrat. Now he's an independent. He's been seeing this since day one, and he's been very vocal about this and has not been apologetic. Now, he's not a Republican, but he sees his community going through this. So people here in Southern Arizona or around the state, I would say, mayors specifically, they see this. These high-profile mayors in Chicago and New York and in some California towns that have been playing politics the entire time, they're having to be forced now to see this. And even those that are in denial now, I mean, they're in worse shape. But they're seeing the tragic circumstances of it. And I visited New York recently, and I'm telling you, it is real. What you see on TV, you're seeing it right there on the street, and they can't not ignore it.
Let's talk about Arizona and its efforts with HCR 2060. Do you believe that that is the right thing to do? Is it necessary? And I'll give you my point of view in a moment, but what do you think of this and the Arizona voters voting on it?
Well, I spent 8 years working for the state of Arizona for Governor Ducey. And when we started our term, Obama was president, and then we had Trump as president, and then we had Biden as president. So in a very unique 8 years, our administration was able to work with 3 different White Houses, and they all approached the issue differently. And during the Obama years is when we started the Border Task Force because that was necessary. The federal government wasn't doing enough to secure the border. We thought then that it was the worst that we had ever seen, and it was then until Biden came up years later to just say, watch me, how I can mess this up like no one else before. During the Trump years, something else was necessary. So states have, I guess, an opportunity to react to what's happening. But this is a federal issue at the end of the day.
It is.
Now, this measure has been met with skepticism and even criticism from the business community and even law enforcement. So I'm listening to law enforcement on this and saying, what are the issues that you see? What are the potentially harmful things? We don't want to try to make something better and make it worse by trying to make it better the way that this seems to be going. So at the end of the day, this is a federal issue. And President Biden right now has the authority and the power to fix this with the stroke of a pen by reinstating Remain in Mexico, ending catch and release, and also the abuse of the parole authority. Those are the things that are highly impacting the traffic. If he would do that, then none of these efforts by the states will be necessary.
But that we don't believe that's going to happen. But here's the issue, and this is my concern. Tell me what you think of this. Let's say the Supreme Court of the United States says that the the law in Texas is constitutional, and Texas begins to enforce those laws, we are going to see a huge uptick of traffic in Arizona, because you know better than anyone that the cartels are sophisticated. They'll reroute traffic from Texas to Arizona. So if we don't pass something, are we now going to set ourselves up for a huge increase in border crossers? Are we not by default needing to pass something?
The number one role of government is to protect its citizens. And you will do that in whatever jurisdiction you have. And in terms of a governor, they have the jurisdiction of their state. And that's what Texas has done. And that's what Arizona, attempted to do years back and has done again now. So we don't have to guess what's going to happen there. We've seen that happen. When Texas has applied these different measures, we've seen the traffic flow over to Arizona. And then over to now San Diego area as well, as Arizona takes some action on this. So the traffic is going to flow to the path of least resistance, because the cartels run a business. They want to be profitable, and they're going to go where the border is open. That's why when you start meal pieces on how you're going to fix this, it gets it even more dangerous. I wouldn't put the responsibility on the states for doing something there. The responsibility is on the White House to do something about it. Congress has, and people say it's a federal government responsibility, and it is. And Congress has done that on the House side. The Senate hasn't, and this White House hasn't. So it's a federal issue, but it lies right now with the White House.
So how do you change the narrative in Washington? Because what we've seen, once again, you see Schumer and others saying, look, we're doing something, and the Republicans are proving they don't want to fix this issue. When we know that you've got H.R. 2, the things you've worked on that'll never see the light of day in the Senate, how do you change the narrative to put the pressure on them to take these issues up, get them in the Senate for debate, and see if you can't agree on something?
By changing the majority. By changing the majority in the Senate and by changing who's in the White House. That's exactly how you change that narrative. Right now, Biden has proved that he's not willing to do anything about this, even for political reasons. Mike, he's tanking on the polls. People don't respect his work on the economy, and definitely not on the border. They put it on him as much as they've tried to put it on anyone else. The public knows that it's his fault, and even then, he doesn't do something about it. He does not want this border secured. So the way we change it is by changing who's in the White House.
All right, so last thing, and I'm going to maybe throw a curveball at you. I just read a story this morning, and this is on the commerce and trade side of things. American farmers in southern Arizona suffering, saying that the Mexican government is not living up to its agreement on sending water across the border. Mm-hmm. Yeah. How do you fix that issue? Is your office looking into it and addressing it?
Yes, we are. We're looking into that. This is happening on the Texas side more than it is on the Arizona side, but this is a big issue. We actually had a meeting where I was a part of with the Mexican ambassador, pressed them on this, tried to sway his way around it, and we kept pressuring with this point. Also been talking to our own Secretary of State's office to put the pressure on Mexico on this. Those are water rights that we have, and they belong to the United States, and they need to be pressured into giving up what's ours.
And, Arizona, you've worked in the governor's office for such a long time. Our number one trading partner. We have great relationships with Mexico and the businesses on both sides of the border. We have got to foster those relationships, and securing the border is a big way of doing that.
The relationship with Mexico and the proximity to Mexico should be an asset, not a liability. Some are trying to make it a liability, and this border situation has made it harder on that. But the relationship is still strong, and we need to continue to foster that. In the way that we prioritize American interest on this, there is a way to win-win. But listen, when you don't respect the rule of law on either side of the border, things are not going to go well.
Congressman, thanks for coming in.
Thank you so much, Mike. Happy to be on.
Congressman Juan Ciscomani spending some time working very hard in a bipartisan way.
Thanks for watching the Mike Broomhead Show. Tap to watch the first season of Amazing Arizonans, a KTAR News podcast. You can also click the button in the middle to subscribe.